Nkoli cleared her throat and spit into the bowl. Then she tilted it, letting a slimy, sticky substance slide out and into the soup. The morning light was just bright enough now for Mamugo to catch a glimpse of the substance. It was pale and vicious, looking nasal mucus. And as it hit the bubbling soup, Nkoli quickly grabbed her ladle and stirred it in. Mamugo's eyes widened in horror. A gentle dawn broke over the rolling hills of Enugu, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. The morning mist clung to the lush green hillsides, slowly lifting to reveal a village nestled in a valley. This village, set in a particular beautiful part of Enugu, was waking up to another peaceful day. Roosters crowed in the distance, and the crisp air carried the scent of dew and the faint smoke of early cooking fires. In this calm community, people lived simple lives. Farmers tilled the reddish soil of their fields, and children with bright eyes chased chickens along dusty paths. The landscape around them was calm and inviting. Tall palm trees and stout mango trees dotted the roads, and beyond the huts and modest houses, one could see the outline of the woody hills standing guard against the horizon. It was a picture of peace and natural beauty, and everyone in the village felt lucky to call this place home. But on this particular morning, something was unusual in the village. At the edge of the main road, near the small marketplace, a newcomer had appeared. She was a young woman named Nkoli. No one knew where Nkoli had come from. She had simply arrived one day quietly on a dusty evening, carrying a few pots and a bundle of belongings. She was slender, with warm brown skin and large watchful eyes. Her face was gentle, but there was a hint of mystery in her eyes that made the villagers wonder about her past. Nkoli spoke softly and rarely mentioned anything about her family or hometown, leaving everyone guessing. Nkoli settled in quickly by renting a tiny old shop at the corner of the marketplace. The shop had mud brick walls and a rusty corrugated iron roof. Like many others in the village, it stood beneath a great avocado tree that provided cool shade. The previous owner of the shop had left it vacant, and villagers were curious about how this stranger came so suddenly to take it. Some whispered among themselves, "Who is she? Does anyone know her people?" But Nkoli simply offered a polite smile to questions about her origin and changed the subject. She was pleasant enough, greeting her neighbors each morning with a quiet "Good morning, ma," or "Good morning, sir," in the local manner. Yet, she kept a certain distance. It was clear she wanted to build a new life here, and the villagers, being kind, decided to welcome her even if she remained a bit of a mystery. It wasn't long before Nkoli revealed why she had come. She was a cook and hoped to make a living selling food. The village market was small but busy, especially on market days, and there was always room for another good cook. So, one bright morning, Nkoli lit a fire in the open air kitchen behind her little shop. She placed a big blackened cooking pot on the fire. The smell of wood smoke rose into the fresh morning air as she prepared her ingredients. Villagers passing by could see her chopping vegetables and stirring soups diligently. She had a modest display table out front, covered with a clean but warm tablecloth, ready to serve whatever meals she prepared. At first, only a few curious people stopped to eat at Nkoli's stall. There was old Papa Nene, who was known to test any new cook's food out of curiosity. There were some children who had been sent on errands and returned hungry, and a traveling trader who was just passing through. Nkoli welcomed them quietly, with careful movements. She served them generous portions of her cooking into deep bowls. That first day, she had made a simple yam porridge with leafy greens and a side of pepper sauce. The dish looked ordinary, but the moment her first customers took a bite, their eyes widened with surprise and delight. "This is delicious!" Papa Nene exclaimed, his withered face breaking into a smile. He had expected the food to be decent at best, but this was better than anything he had eaten in a long while. The yam porridge was rich and comforting, with just the right amount of salt and spice. The vegetables were fresh and cooked to perfection. The pepper sauce had a gentle heat that tickled the tongue without burning. Even the aroma rising from the bowl was wonderful, like a blend of fresh herbs and something else he couldn't quite name. He quickly took another spoonful. The two children, a brother and sister, who had stopped by, nodded eagerly as they ate. "Auntie, your food is so nice," the little girl piped up to Nkoli, licking her spoon. Nkoli gave a humble bow of her head and smiled, thanking the child softly. The traveling trader, who was weary from his journey, found himself rejuvenated by the tasty meal. In no time, he finished everything Nkoli served him and asked for more to take on to the road. Nkoli's heart warmed at this compliment. With each praise, she responded quietly, "Thank you. I'm glad you like it. Please come again." Word spread through the village quickly after that first day. By the next morning, a few more people showed up at Nkoli's store, eager to test her cooking. Nkoli had woken up at sunrise to visit the local farmers market for fresh ingredients. She returned to her shop, carrying baskets of vegetables, spices, and staples balanced on her head. That day, she decided to make jollof rice with fried plantains and fish stew, a meal that was a favorite among many. As the rice simmered in tomato and spice, sending a mouth-watering aroma into the air, villagers found themselves drawn to Nkoli's corner by their noses. One by one, they came, farm hands on their break, mothers who didn't feel like cooking after the morning's chores, school children with a few coins given by their parents for lunch. They lined up in front of Nkoli's store, bowls and plates in hand, excitedly waiting for a taste of the new talked about food. "Please, give me one plate," a young man named Chidi requested, holding out a metal dish. "I've been hearing that your jollof rice is the best in town." Nkoli smiled gently and filled his dish with bright orange rice studded with bits of carrot and peas, placed a golden fried plantain slice on the side, and ladled a spoonful of rich fish stew over the top. Chidi paid and stepped aside, and the next customer came forward immediately. By noon that day, every grain of rice, every drop of spoon, and every plantain Nkoli had cooked was gone. She had sold out completely. Customers were satisfied and full, praising her food as they went back to their work or homes. Some even licked their fingers clean and vowed to return with friends the next day. Nkoli watched them go with a mild smile on her face. She was happy that her new business was doing well. In fact, it was doing unusually well. For a newcomer who nobody knew, selling out of food on only her second day was remarkable, perhaps too remarkable, some thought. Across the market, another food seller looked on with a frown. This was Mamugo, an older woman who had been selling her own cooking in the market for many years. She made a living feeding the village staples like beans porridge, roasted yam, and okra soup. Mamugo had her regular customers and her food was decent. But ever since Nkoli set up her store, Mamugo noticed a decline in her own business. Fewer people were coming to her, and some who used to buy from her daily had drifted over to the new girl's place. That afternoon, Mamugo sat on a wooden bench by her cooking stand, stirring her pot of soup absent-mindedly, while her eyes kept darting over to the lively crowd at Nkoli's shop. What is so special about her food? Mamugo muttered under her breath. Only one customer sat in front of her, slowly eating a plate of her yam and vegetable stew. Mamugo couldn't help but ask the young woman who was eating, have you tried that new girl's food? Is it truly better than mine? The customer, looking a bit uncomfortable, swallowed and replied softly, ah, Mamugo, people are saying her food is very tasty. I tried her rice yesterday. It was really good. Mamugo pressed her lips together tightly as the customer focused back on the meal quietly. The older woman felt a pang of both jealousy and worry. She had seen competition come and go, but never had she seen someone attract so many customers in such a short time. Maybe she just has a gift for cooking, offered a nearby fruit seller who had overheard. Some people are like that. Mamugo shook her head slowly. Hmm, gift or no gift, this is not normal, she said in a low voice, mostly to herself. She noticed her Nkoli always sold out and wondered how it was possible. Mamugo prided herself on her recipes passed down from her mother. Could these strangers' recipes be that much better? It stung her pride to think so. Something about it all felt strange, but she couldn't put a finger on it yet. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of red and gold over the hills, Nkoli closed up her shop for the day. She washed her pots and cleaned the area quietly while humming an old song under her breath. The marketplace was nearly empty now. Most traders had gone home, and only the sounds of distant chatter and a few crickets chirping in the bushes filled the air. Nkoli picked up a small clay pot from a hidden corner of her cooking area. She held it carefully and slipped it into the folds of her wrapper, the colorful cloth she tied around her waist, before heading out. Instead of going straight to her home, a one-room mud house she rented at the far end of the village, Ngozi walked towards the outskirts of the village, where the forest began. The path was narrow and quiet. She moved with purpose, as if familiar with the route, even though it was just her third night in the village. Tall trees with broad leaves formed dark cloud against the dimming sky. Nkoli's heart beat steadily. She was not afraid of the forest at twilight. In fact, she almost felt drawn to it. After a few minutes, she arrived at a small clearing deep among the trees, far enough that the village lights were no longer visible. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient iroko tree, its roots gnawed and protruding from the earth. By one of these large roots, there was a hollow that looked like a natural little cave. Nkoli knelt before this hollow space. She placed the clay pot she carried on the ground and opened its lid. Inside the pot was a thick, sticky substance, a mixture of special herbs, perhaps, but mostly a collection of mokus that she had saved from herself. Nkoli had been fighting a slight cold, or at least she pretended to have one. In truth, she let herself keep having a runny nose as part of a secret ritual. It was an unpleasant task that made her shiver with disgust each time, but she forced herself to do it. With a look of disgust, she dipped her finger into the slimy mixture and smeared a bit of it on the base of the great tree root. Then she spoke in a low whisper. I have done as promised. Accept this and continue to make my food desirable. Let all who taste it crave more. Let my pots always be empty by day's end. Her voice was shaky but determined. These words were part of a ritual prayer she had been taught. A faint stirring of wind rustled the leaves above as Uncle finished speaking. As if some unseen spirit acknowledged her offering, she closed the clay pot and held it to her chest for a moment. In that still and lonely clearing, Nkoli remembered how she came to perform this strange ritual. Not long ago, in another town far from here, Nkoli had struggled terribly. She had tried to sell food there too, but no matter how hard she worked or how good her food was, people rarely bought from her. She often went home with unsold food and cried herself to sleep hungry. Desperate to escape poverty, Nkoli had consulted a traveling herbalist and diviner. The old man had peered at her with cloudy eyes and said he knew a way to guarantee her success. But it came at a price. He gave her a mixture of herbs to drink and a small charm, and he instructed her in no uncertain terms. Every meal you cook, you must put a part of yourself into it. As long as your essence is in the food, people will be drawn to it like ants to honey. They will eat and never suspect a thing. The more they eat, the more they will crave it. This is the sacrifice you must make for prosperity. Nkoli, innocent and eager for a solution, agreed. That very night, under the light of a crescent moon, the herbalist performed a secret ritual with Nkoli. She remembered trembling as she cut a strand of her hair and pricked her finger to add a drop of her blood to a bowl of strange dark liquid the man prepared. She drank the bitter portion, gagging at its foul taste. That was when he told her about the final requirement. Her kata, the mucus from her nose and throat, had to go into the food. It was binding agent of the charm, symbolizing that her life force mingled with the meal. It was disgusting. Nkoli had recoiled at the thought, but the old man insisted that without this, the charm would not hold. You will never go hungry again if you do this, he assured her in a grave voice. But if you ever stop, everything you gained will vanish or worse. Ever since that night, Nkoli had done as instructed. She moved far away, choosing a place where no one knew her, so they wouldn't question her strange habits. In each pot of soup or rice she cooked, she secretly mixed a spoonful of her kata. She made sure no one ever saw her do it, usually stirring it in when she was alone in the early dawn before customers arrived or when their attention was elsewhere. It made her feel shame and guilt. She knew it was a horrible thing to do, but the promise of success was too tempting, and indeed, it seemed to be working. Here she was in a new village, and already everyone loved her food. Nkoli tried to convince herself that no harm was being done. No one knows. She whispered to herself, still kneeling by the tree. It's just a little bit. It won't hurt anyone. They are all enjoying the food. I have a chance at a good life now. But deep in her heart, a note of worry tightened. She quickly silenced that feeling, picked up her clay pot, and stood up. The forest had grown darker, and the first stars of the night twinkled through the canopy of leaves. Nkoli felt a sudden chill and realized it was time to go back. She carefully hid the clay pot in a small sack she had brought and made her way out of the clearing. As she left, an owl hooted from somewhere high in the trees, and the sound echoed like a warning. Nkoli glanced back nervously, but the clearing was empty save for the rustling leaves. She hurried down the path toward the village, determined to put on a cheerful face for the next day's business, as if nothing unusual had happened that night. The next few days in the village followed a similar pattern. Nkoli would cook in the morning, and by the midday her food was completely sold out. More and more people came to her store, even from neighboring hamlets, when they heard of the delicious meals at the marketplace. Nkoli's eyes would light up humbly as she collected her earnings and heard the praise. But always she remained cautious, never letting anyone come into her cooking area while she prepared her dishes. If a friendly neighbor or customer tried to peek into her pot, she would gently turn them away with a laugh, saying, it's not ready yet. Come back in a few minutes. Nobody thought much of this at first. After all, every cook guarded their kitchen to some extent. However, whispers of suspicion began to grow among a few villagers. Mamugo was not the only one who found Nkoli's sudden success odd. One evening, as the market was closing, Mamugo sat with her friend Adako, who sold vegetables, and with Papa Nene, the elderly man who had first tried Nkoli's yam porridge. They gathered under the avocado tree near Nkoli's closed shop, sharing their thoughts in hushed tones. I have lived in this village all my life, Papa Nene said quietly, adjusting his glasses. And I have tasted the cooking of every woman who set up here. Nkoli's food, it is truly good. But there is something about it I can't explain. It's like once you taste it, you just want to keep eating it every day. I found myself thinking about her food even at night, and that has never happened to me before. Adako nodded slowly. My own children refuse to eat my cooking these days, she admitted with a sigh. They are always asking for money to go buy food from Auntie Nkoli. Even when I cook their favorite okra soup, they grumble that it's not as good as Nkoli's stew. It's as if everyone has been under a spell, she whispered the last part, glancing around to ensure no one else had. Mamugo, with her arms folded tightly across her chest, leaned in and said in a low, firm voice, something is not right. People don't just appear out of nowhere and suddenly all the world loves their food so much that they forget others. I suspect she might be using, you know, some charm or juju. At that, Papa Nene frowned thoughtfully, and Adako's eyes widened a little. These were serious claims to make without proof. It's true, Mamugo continued, seeing their reaction. I didn't want to speak up without reason, but I've heard of such things happening elsewhere. In some towns, there have been stories about dark stories of food sellers using methods to attract customers. They say some cook with water used to wash dead bodies or add all sorts of filthy things to their food as sacrifices to dark spirits. She paused, noticing the shocked expression on her friends' faces. I'm not saying that's what Uncle is doing, no, Mamugo clarified. But we must consider that something unnatural is at play. How else can we explain this? Hmm. This hold she has on everyone's appetite? Papa Nene looked uneasy. He had always been a rational man, but even he could not deny the peculiar craving he felt for Uncle's meals. If you truly believe something is wrong, what do you suggest we do, Mamugo, eh? He asked. Mamugo pursed her lips. We need to watch her carefully. If she's doing something secret, we must catch her in the act. We cannot just throw accusations at an innocent person. But if our suspicions are correct, we owe it to the village to uncover the truth. It's for everyone's good, though. Adag shivered slightly as a cool evening breeze picked up. The idea that a friendly young woman like Nkoli could be hiding a dark secret in her cooking was frightening. Be careful, though, she warned. If she really is using juju, confronting her could be very dangerous. Mamugo nodded solemnly. I will be careful. We will have to be smart about this. In her heart, a determination hardened. She decided that she would rise before dawn the next day and observe Nkoli's preparation quietly from afar. If there was any strange ingredient or ritual involved, she hoped to see it with her own eyes. Night fell, and the village slept under a blanket of twinkling stars. Nkoli, in her small room, also tried to sleep, but in her dreams that night, she was restless. She dreamt that she was stirring a giant pot, and no matter how much she stirred, the pot was full of slimy, greenish soup that smelled awful. In the dream, villagers were standing around her, watching silently with hollow eyes. When she woke up before dawn, sweat clung to her forehead, and she was filled with a sense of dread. She shook off the bad dream and prepared for the day, telling herself it was only a nightmare and nothing more. Before the first rooster crowed, Nkoli was already at her shop. The sky was still indigo, with the faintest hint of light on the horizon. She fetched water from the nearby well and started her fire. Today, she planned to cook a big pot of egusi soup, a rich melon seed soup with pounded yam, a meal sure to attract customers by afternoon. She moved about quietly, thinking she was alone at this hour. What Nkoli did not know was that she was not really alone. Hidden behind a stack of empty sacks and baskets a short distance away, Mamugo crouched, watching the young cook's every move with sharp, determined eyes. Nkoli worked skillfully as usual. She roasted some dried fish over the fire, ground her melon seeds for the egusi, and plucked fresh green vegetables. The soft cracking of fire and Nkoli's occasional cough were the only sounds in the still morning air. Mamugo observed patiently, careful not to shift her weight too quickly or make a noise. She had a dark shawl around her to blend in with the pre-dawn shadows and peered just enough to see but not to be seen. As the sky grew lighter, Collie's egusi soup was bubbling in the pot, giving off a rich, savory aroma that made Mamugo's mouth water even as she remained tense. Nkoli added her ingredients one by one: the ground melon seeds, palm oil that sizzled and turned the broth to bright orange, tender pieces of fish and bushmeat, a pinch of salt and ground chili pepper. She stirred the pot with a wooden ladle, and steam rose in a gentle cloud. Then Nkoli paused and looked around. Mamugo immediately shrank further behind the sacks, holding her breath. Nkoli set down her ladle. Thinking no one was near, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small covered bowl, a different container from her clay pot. That clay pot remained hidden at her home, except when she refilled this smaller bowl. With careful haste, Nkoli removed the lid. Even from her hiding spot, Mamugo could not see exactly what was inside, but she saw Ngozi's face twist with slight disgust as the young woman held the bowl over the pot. Nkoli cleared her throat and spit into the bowl. Then she tilted it, letting a slimy, sticky substance slide out and into the soup. The morning light was just bright enough now for Mamugo to catch a glimpse of the substance. It was pale and viscous, looking nasal mucus. And as it hit the bubbling soup, Nkoli quickly grabbed her ladle and stirred it in. Mamugo's eyes widened in horror. She clamped a hand over her mouth to keep her from gasping out loud. She felt her stomach churn as she realized what she had just witnessed. It looked like Nkoli had poured her own kata, the mucus from her nose, into the soup. Nkoli's lips moved as she stared. She was muttering something under her breath. Perhaps it was a spell or prayer. Mamugo couldn't hear the words clearly, but she guessed it was part of the ritual. After a few moments, Nkoli nodded to herself, seemingly satisfied that the secret ingredient was well hidden in the soup. She wiped her hand and face with a cloth, composing herself. Her expression softened back into the pleasant, calm look everyone was used to. It was as if the unsettling act had never happened. Mamugo remained in her spot, heart thudding loudly in her chest. She waited until Nkoli stepped away from the fire to fetch something from inside her shop. Taking that chance, Mamugo quietly slipped out of her hiding place and hurried away, careful to stay low until she was out of sight. Once she was at a safe distance, she straightened up and walked briskly towards the cluster of houses where the other early risers were waking. By midday, Nkoli's egusi soup and pounded yam were ready, and as expected, customers flocked her store. The sun was high and bright, and the day had turned hot, but that did not stop people from queuing hungrily, bowls in hand. Nkoli, outwardly calm but inwardly still a bit unsettled from her bad dream, served each person with a polite smile. She noticed Mamugo was not at her own store across the way today, which was unusual, but she was too busy serving her long line of customers to wonder about it for long. Nearby, Mamugo watched from behind another store, joined by Adako and Papa Anene. They had been informed of what Mamugo witnessed, and each face bore a mix of anger, disgust, and anxiety. They saw how unaware and happy the villagers were as they ate Nkoli's food, and their hearts pounded, knowing what foul thing was in that meal. Mamugo's hand trembled with outrage as she clenched them. She could not hold back much longer. A group of young men were at Nkoli's store, laughing and chatting as they ate, praising the wonderful taste of egusi soup. One of them called out to Nkoli, "Auntie, you have a special magic in your cooking. Oh, this soup is too sweet." He meant it as a harmless compliment, but Mamugo flinched when she heard the word magic. She took that as her cue. It was time. Suddenly, Mamugo stepped forward into the open and shouted, "Stop! Stop eating at once!" Her voice rang out loud and clear across the marketplace. Everyone turned, startled by the urgent tone. Nkoli looked up from behind her table, a ladle in her hand, surprised to see Mamugo marching toward her with fury in her eyes. Adako and Papa Nene followed close behind, along with a few other villagers who had caught wind that something was amiss. The young men who had been joking fell silent, bowls in hand. A few people still waiting in line backed away, confused. "What's happening?" One woman murmured. Mamugo pointed a finger at Nkoli, her voice shaking with emotion. "Do not take another bite of that food," she warned the customers. "Nkoli has been putting disgusting and evil thing in it." A collective gasp rose from the small crowd. Nkoli's eyes went wide with shock. "Mamugo, what are you saying?" Nkoli cried out. Her heart started to race. She tried to maintain her composure, but she could see the accusing look on Mamugo's face and realized with dread that somehow the woman knew her secret. Papa Nene stepped forward and gently addressed the onlookers. "Everyone, please step back and don't eat that food yet. We need to find out the truth of this matter." His tone was serious and concerned, which made people even more anxious. A few who had been eating slowly set down their half-finished bowls, suddenly uncertain. One man even spat out the morsel he had in his mouth, worried that something was wrong. Nkoli felt a wave of panic as the murmurs grew. "What's going on? What did she do?" people asked one another. Children, sensing the tension, stayed close to their parents, eyes wide. Mamugo, gathering courage from the supportive murmurs around her, announced loudly, "This morning, while it was still dark, I saw Nkoli adding her own kata, yes, the mucus from her nose, into that pot of soup." Some people exclaimed in horror, others in disbelief. "Chineke, God forbid!" An old woman cried out, covering her mouth. A teenage boy made a gagging sound and stared at the bowl in his hands in revulsion. One of the young men who had praised the food earlier immediately threw his bowl to the ground, the contents spilling on the dust. The idea of what they might have been consuming churned everyone's stomach. Nkoli's knees felt weak. She clutched the edge of her table. No, no, that's a lie, she protested, shaking her head. Her voice was high with desperation. I would never do such a thing, Mamugo. Why are you saying this? She attempted to sound outraged, but there was a tremble in her voice. Nkoli's worst fear was coming true. She glanced around at the faces of her customers, many now looking angry or sickened. Adako stepped forward with sorrow in her eyes. She had always been kind-hearted, and even now looked at Nkoli with a mix of disappointment and pity. Nkoli, she said gently, Mamugo would not make such a claim without reason. Please, if there is any truth in this, it's better for you to confess now. Nkoli's eyes darted from Adako to Mamugo to the crowd. She shook her head again, tears starting to form. It's not true. They are jealous of me because I have many customers, she pleaded to the crowd, trying to regain their favor. I have done nothing wrong. Why would I put something like kata in my own food? Think about it. She managed a weak shaking laugh, as if the idea was too crazy to believe. Some of the crowd hesitated. It was a strange claim indeed. A few of Nkoli's regular patrons didn't want to believe it. Yes, why would she do that? A man in a trader's apron muttered, looking unsure. It makes no sense, another customer said softly. Mamugo was prepared for this doubt. You want proof? She snapped. She moved around to the side of Nkoli's store, where the cooking pot still sat over a low fire, and where Nkoli's utensils and ingredients were arranged. Nkoli tried to block her path, but two other women gently held Nkoli by the arms to keep her from interfering. Nkoli struggled weakly, crying, Leave me! Leave me! But she was too overwhelmed to fight them off. With sharp eyes, Mamugo scanned the area. She saw a small ceramic bowl sitting on a stool near the cooking area, exactly the bowl she had seen Nkoli using that morning. There was a rag next to it, a rag stained with something slimy and yellowish. Mamugo picked up the rag gingerly and held it up. Look at this, she said. The people craned their necks. Even from a distance, they could see the rag was damp and had an icky, glistening stain. Adako moved closer, then clinched. That looks like mucus, she said quietly, feeling sick. Nkoli's face crumpled. She knew that rag was what she used to constantly wipe her runny nose while cooking. It was as good as evidence. I have a cold, Nkoli said weakly, trying to find another excuse. My nose has been running. I just used that rag to clean it, that's all. Mamugo wasn't satisfied with just the rag. She grabbed the small bowl and peered inside. Along the inner sides of the bowl, there was a trace of a sticky pale green fume. She turned the bowl upside down over her palm, and a stringly drop of the stuff fell onto her hand. Mamugo felt disgusted but held her composure. She held out her hand to show the crowd. Here is what she adds to your food, she shouted. The crowd erupted at this evidence. People began shouting in anger and dismay. Some women wailed, and children hid behind their parents. Sophia Kwa, what an abomination, cried one man. Others yelled things like, we trusted you, and how could you do this? A few villagers who had eaten Nkoli's meals even the day before felt their stomachs turn. One or two ran aside to retch, suddenly feeling sick, knowing what had been in the food. Nkoli broke into sobs. Please, I'm sorry, she wailed, her denial collapsing in the face of the evidence and the crowd's reaction. The two women holding her let go, and she sank to her knees on the ground. Tears streamed down her face. I didn't mean to harm anyone. Then why? Why would you do such a thing? Papa Nene asked, his voice sorrowful and confused. He had liked Nkoli and her food, and it pained him to see this happen. Nkoli looked around at the angry, bewildered faces of the villagers. She realized there was no escape now, and part of her was tired of carrying the secret. In a trembling voice, she explained, I I was desperate. Before I came here, I had nothing. I tried so hard to succeed by doing honest work, but I kept failing. I was afraid of being hungry, of being a nobody. So, so I went to someone for help. She swallowed hard, then continued. He gave me a charm, a ritual. He told me if I put my kata, the mucus from my body, into the food, people would love it and buy everything. I thought it was just superstition, but when I tried it, it seemed to work. The crowd listened in a mix of fascination and disgust. As Nkoli spoke, her voice cracked with remorse. I know I was wrong. I knew it was terrible, a terrible, terrible thing to do, but I was blinded by my wish to never be poor and hungry again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I thought I thought it would only make people like like the test more. I didn't think of how disgusting or dishonest it was. I didn't think of the harm it would cause. Some faces in the crowd softened slightly at her confession, hearing the desperation and sorrow in her voice, but others remained furious. So you bewitched us for our money? Someone shouted. All our money. We ate your filth. A woman cried, covering her face in anger and shame. Mamugo stepped back, breathing heavily. She had achieved her goal of exposing Nkoli, but even she felt a sting of sadness seeing the young woman sobbing on the ground. Still, what Nkoli had done was beyond forgiveness for many. You used all of us, Mamugo said bitterly. You took away our right to choose, honestly, by tricking us with your charm. A few villagers moved, as if to grab Nkoli and to drag her away to punish her. One man picked up a switch, another a piece of rope. They were talking about taking her to the village square or even to the police. The situation was growing more chaotic by the second. Seeing the anger rising around her, Nkoli's eyes flashed with fear again. She scrambled up from her knees and suddenly, with a burst of energy, fueled by panic, she darted through a gap in the crowd. Nkoli, stop! Someone yelled, but she was already running with all her might. She fled past the stalls and out of the marketplace, holding up her wrapper with one hand so she wouldn't trip. People hurried to follow, but Nkoli was fast. Feet pounded the dirt roads as a handful of young men chased after her, and others followed behind at a sprint. Nkoli headed towards the outskirts of the village, the same direction of the forest clearing she had visited the night before. Perhaps she thought she could hide there, or that the spirits she served might protect her. The mid-afternoon sun beat down, and sweat poured down Nkoli's face as she ran, tears blurring her vision. She reached the line of trees where the village ended and the forest began. The villagers were still some distance behind, though they hadn't given up the chase. Nkoli dashed into the shadows of the forest. Birds and small animals scattered at the sudden intrusion of a running human. Deeper and deeper, Nkoli went. Her breath raged, leaping over roots and pushing aside branches. When the pursuing villagers finally reached the forest edge, they paused. The forest was thick and dark even in daytime, and many were hesitant to go far inside, especially knowing that Nkoli had performed dark rituals there. Nkoli, come out! Shouted one of the braver men. Adako, who had followed at a distance, stood wringing her hands in worry. She did not want anyone to be harmed, not even Nkoli, but she also feared what Nkoli might do if cornered. They ventured a little way in, several people calling for Nkoli to surrender herself, but the forest only answered with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant birds' calls. It was as if Nkoli had vanished completely among the trees. Indeed, as Nkoli ran, she somehow found her way back to the clearing with the ancient Iroko tree. Out of breath and shaking, she pressed her back against the huge trunk. Help me! Help me! Help me, please! She whispered to no one in particular, perhaps to the spirit or just to the air. There was no answer except the rustle of leaves. Back at the forest edge, Mamugo advised caution. Let her go, she told the younger men who wanted to keep searching. This is now in the hands of God and whatever spirit she chooses to deal with. If we go too deep, who knows what trap or harm may befall us? A few nodded in agreement, or willing to risk angering any unseen forces or getting lost in the dark woods. And so, slowly, the villagers turned back, leaving the forest in silence. Nkoli watched through tears as the voices of the villagers grew distant. When she was sure they had gone, she stepped away from the tree, her heart heavy as a stone. She knew she could not return to the village. Her life there was over. With slow, sorrowful steps, Nkoli disappeared further into the forest, her figure eventually swallowed by the green shadows. No one in the village ever saw Nkoli again after that day. Some said she must have found her way to the main road and traveled to another town, carrying her shame and her secret with her. Others whispered in fear that perhaps the spirit she served took her as payment for breaking her promise or for failing the ritual. A few compassionate souls like Adako prayed that Nkoli found a way to learn from her mistakes and survive somewhere without resorting to dark practices again. In the days that followed, the village tried to return to normal. The people scrubbed and cleaned Nkoli's old store thoroughly, throwing away her pots and utensils, unable to bear the thought of reusing them. They invited a local pastor and also the village elder to perform prayers and cleansing rites in the marketplace to chase away any lingering bad spirit or curses. Mamogo's store became busy again as villagers returned loyally to her and other honest food vendors, though many did so with a new sense of caution. Parents used the tale of Nkoli as a lesson for their children. Adako, for instance, sat her children down and gently explained what had happened. You see, she told them softly, greed and desperation made Nkoli do a terrible thing. She chose a wrong path because she was impatient and afraid. In life, we must work hard and be patient for success, and never ever harm others or deceive them to get our way. It might bring riches for a short time, but in the end, it leads to shame and disaster. The children nodded, eyes wide as they absorbed the lesson. Likewise, the elders in the village told the youth, no matter how tempting it is, do not dabble in dark practices. There is always a heavy price. And be careful whom you trust and what you eat. Not everything that tastes good is good for you. These words sank in deeply. For a long time after, anyone who remembered Nkoli's story felt both a pang of pity and a surge of caution. As for Nkoli's little shop under the avocado tree, it remained empty for a while. The avocado tree itself continued to bear fruit and give shade, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded beneath it. Now and then, a traveler passing through would ask, wasn't there a woman who cooked delicious meals here once? As the villagers would exchange glances and then share the tale of the mysterious cook who arrived from nowhere and vanished without a trace after a dark secret was revealed. It became a local legend, a story told around fires at night to teach children and warn them. Life in the beautiful hills of Enugu went on. Wiser than before, the sun rises there still as golden, the hills as green, and the laughter of children as bright. But the people carried a new understanding that true success has no shortcut, and that trust and honesty are as important an ingredient in community life as salt in soup. The shocking saga of Nkoli would not be forgotten, and it would remind everyone for years to come that no secret stays hidden forever, and every action, good or bad, has its results. No matter how desperate you are, there is no shortcut to true success. Nkoli used a secret ritual and added something disgusting to her food to attract customers, thinking it would bring her riches. But in the end, her secret was exposed, and she lost everything, including her place in the community. The lesson is this: do not harm others, just to help yourself. What is done in secret will one day come to light. Honest work may take time, but it brings peace and lasting success. Not everything that tastes sweet is clean. Be careful where you eat and always choose honesty over quick money. Thank you so much for watching this amazing story about Nkoli on African Stories by V. If you liked this story, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories by V. And do not forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.